My name is Serena, and I never thought I'd feel like a stranger in my own home. It was one quiet morning in our small Ohio town, the kind where the sun filters through the maple trees and you can hear kids biking down the street, when my world turned upside down. I was sipping coffee in my living room, sketching ideas for a new client's logo, when my best friend Mavis burst through the front door, her face tight with anger. In her hand was a tiny black device, no bigger than a quarter, with a glinting lens that made my stomach churn. "Serena, you need to see this," she said, her voice low but sharp. "I found it behind your kitchen curtains while I was helping you clean." I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. "What is that?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. I'd felt it for weeks, the uneasy prickle of being watched, the sense that someone knew too much about my life. "It's a camera," Mavis said, her dark eyes scanning the room like she was already hunting for more. "And it's not the only one. I found two others, one by the front door, another in the hallway near your bedroom." My hands shook as I set my mug down, coffee sloshing onto the table. Cameras. In my house. The place where Hudson and I had built our life together, where I'd hung my art on the walls and planted marigolds in the backyard, hoping to make this small-town life my own. I'd moved here from Chicago 3 years ago, trading the city's chaos for the quiet of the Midwest, thinking it would be a fresh start. But now, my sanctuary felt violated, like someone had ripped open the curtains of my soul. "There's no way," I whispered, but my mind was already racing to the one person who could be behind this, my mother-in-law, Vivian. She'd always been too involved, always poking into our marriage with her suggestions and unannounced visits. I could still hear her voice from last month, standing in my kitchen saying, "Serena, dear, you really should organize your spices better. It's no wonder Hudson's so tired." Her words were always laced with a smile, but they cut deep, reminding me I wasn't the perfect wife she'd imagined for her only son. Mavis, ever the investigator, crouched by the couch, her fingers tracing the edge of a bookshelf. She's been my rock since we were kids in Chicago, back when we'd sneak into each other's houses to escape our family's chaos. Mavis became a private investigator because she hated secrets. She'd grown up with a family who doubted her every move, and she'd learned to uncover the truth to prove them wrong. Now, she was in her element, her ponytail swinging as she pulled another camera from behind a picture frame. "That's 4, she said, her voice steady but furious. "These are wireless, motion-activated, high-end. Someone paid good money to watch you." My stomach twisted. I thought back to Vivian's last visit, when Hudson was away at a teacher's conference. She'd insisted on helping around the house, rearranging my dishes, hovering in corners. I'd thought she was just being her usual overbearing self, but now it clicked. She'd been planting these cameras, turning my home into her personal surveillance hub. "I can't believe she'd do this," I said, but the words felt hollow. I could believe it. Vivian had raised Hudson alone after his dad walked out when he was 5, and she'd never let go of that role as his protector. She'd call him daily, show up with casseroles we didn't ask for, and once even told Hudson's and I wasn't cut out for small-town life. Hudson always brushed it off. "That's just how Mom is, Serena," but this wasn't just meddling. This was an invasion. Mavis grabbed my arm, her grip firm. "Don't touch them yet," she warned. "We need proof. Whoever did this broke the law, stalking, invasion of privacy. If it's her, we'll catch her." I nodded, my heart pounding. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to Vivian, to Hudson, to this town that still saw me as the city girl who didn't belong. I'd left Chicago to escape a job where my boss watched my every move, criticizing my designs, tracking my hours. I'd promised myself I'd never feel that trapped again. But here I was, my own home turned into a cage. As Mavis scanned for more cameras, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. "Vivian. Just checking in, dear." Her text read, "Are you managing okay without Hudson? I worry about you." I stared at the words, my blood running cold. She wasn't worried. She was watching. That night, after Mavis left, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the tiny camera hidden behind my bookshelf. I wanted to rip it down, smash it into pieces, and scream at Vivian for crossing a line I didn't even know existed. But Mavis's warning echoed in my head. We needed evidence, a way to prove Vivian's guilt without her wriggling out of it. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I clutched my phone. I wasn't just angry, I was scared. Scared of what this meant for my marriage, for Hudson, who loved his mother so fiercely he might not believe me. But I couldn't let fear win. Not this time. The next morning, Mavis was back, her laptop open on my dining table, a tangle of cables and gadgets around her. These cameras are streaming to an app, she explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I've hacked into the system to track when they're accessed. Whoever's watching will know exactly when and how often. I nodded, trying to focus, but my mind kept drifting to Hudson. He was still at his conference, probably grading papers in a hotel room, oblivious to the storm brewing at home. I loved him, his quiet humor, the way he'd leave me little notes on the fridge, but his blind spot for his mother had always been a sore point. Growing up, he'd been her whole world, and she'd made sure he knew it. Now, I wondered if he'd choose her over me when the truth came out. Okay, Serena, Mavis said, snapping me back to the moment.
Here's the plan.
We act like nothing's wrong. You go about your day, but we give her something to watch, something that'll make her nervous. If she thinks you're onto her, she'll slip up. I swallowed hard. What do I do? Be yourself, but louder, Mavis said with a grin. Talk about weird stuff happening in the house. Call someone, your sister, maybe, and make sure the cameras catch it. I'll monitor the feeds and log every time she tunes in. My heart raced at the thought of playing this game, but I felt a spark of defiance. 2. Vivian thought she could control me, watch my every move.
Fine.
I'd show her I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. I picked up my phone and texted Vivian back, keeping my tone light. I'm okay, just having coffee with a friend. Thanks for checking in. Seconds later, her reply came. Oh, a friend? Who's that, dear? I could almost see her, sitting in her pristine living room across town, her eyes glued to her phone, watching the feed from my house. It made my skin crawl, but I forced a smile and stepped into the kitchen, where I knew a camera was hidden above the sink. I called my sister, putting the phone on speaker. Hey, you won't believe this, I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. I've been noticing weird things lately. Doors unlocked when I know I locked them, stuff moved around in the house. I think someone's been in here. There was a pause, and I glanced at the camera. A tiny red light flickered, just for a moment. Vivian was watching. My sister played along, her voice skeptical but curious. That's creepy, Serena. You think someone's breaking in? I don't know, I said, leaning closer to the sink, my voice deliberate. But I'm not imagining it. I'm thinking about getting a security system installed. Within minutes, my phone buzzed again. Vivian. Is everything okay, Serena? Sounds like you're stressed. Do you need me to come over? I stared at the text, my pulse quickening. She was nervous, just like Mavis predicted. I typed back. No, I'm handling it. Just looking into some home security options. All day, I kept up the act. I searched signs of stalking on my laptop, angling the screen so the camera in the living room could see it. I called a locksmith, loudly discussing new deadbolts. Each time, Mavis texted me updates. She's watching. 3 logins in the last hour. My stomach churned with every message, but there was a thrill in it, too. For the first time, I was the one in control, not Vivian. By evening, I was exhausted, my emotions a tangle of anger and resolve. I thought about calling Hudson, telling him everything, but I stopped myself. He'd always defended his mother, saying she just cared too much. I wasn't sure he'd believe me without proof. And deep down, I was terrified of what this would do to us. I loved him, but I couldn't keep living under Vivian's shadow. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I promised myself one thing. I'd fight for my home, my marriage, and my right to be free. The next day, I woke with a fire in my chest. I wasn't just fighting Vivian anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the life I'd built with Hudson. Mavis arrived early, Her police uniform swapped for jeans and a leather jacket, but her eyes still sharp with purpose. She'd brought more equipment, including a small device to trace the camera signals. She's been watching nonstop, Mavis said, showing me a log of Vivian's access times. 10 logins since yesterday. She's obsessed. I nodded, my jaw tight. I'd spent years trying to win Vivian over, cooking her favorite meals, inviting her to holidays, hoping she'd see me as family. But every gesture was met with a critique. She'd rearrange my table settings, whisper to Hudson that I worked too much. Now, knowing she'd been spying on me, I felt foolish for trying so hard. But that ended today. We sat in the kitchen, right in front of the camera above the sink. Mavis pulled out a notepad, playing the part of an investigator. So, Serena, she said, her voice loud and clear, you're saying you've noticed suspicious activity for months? Yeah, I replied, my heart pounding but my voice steady. At first, I thought I was paranoid, things like my keys not where I left them, my sketchbooks out of order. But now, with all this going on, I'm sure someone's been watching me. Mavis scribbled in her notepad, her face serious. That's serious. Stalking, breaking and entering, invasion of privacy. These are crimes. We'll need to investigate, maybe check for devices in the house. I nodded, glancing at the camera. The red light flickered again. Vivian was there, hanging on every word. My phone buzzed her again. Serena, I'm worried.
You sound upset.
Should I call Hudson? I ignored the text, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. She was scrambling, trying to cover her tracks. Throughout the morning, I kept the pressure on. I walked through the house, pretending to search for more cameras, pausing in front of each one I knew about. I called my cousin, venting about how violated I felt. It's like someone's trying to control my life, I said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. The camera light blinked, and I felt a surge of power. Vivian thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn otherwise. By noon, Mavis had enough data to confirm Vivian's phone was linked to the camera app. It's her, she said, showing me the logs. Every time you say something suspicious, she logs in within seconds. She's panicking. Good, I said, my voice hard. But inside, I was a mess. I kept thinking about Hudson, about the hurt in his eyes when he'd learned the truth. He'd grown up idolizing his mother, believing her overprotectiveness was love. I didn't want to break that for him, but I couldn't let her keep controlling us. I loved him too much to let our marriage be her puppet show. That afternoon, my phone rang, Hudson. My heart sank. I hadn't told him anything yet, hoping to have solid proof first. Hey, I said, trying to sound normal. How's the conference? Mom's freaking out, he said, his voice tense. She says you're acting strange, accusing her of stuff. What's going on, Serena? I took a deep breath, glancing at the camera in the living room. Has she told you she's been in our house without asking? Or how she always seems to know what I'm doing? There was a long pause. What are you saying? He asked, his voice quiet. I'm saying maybe her concern isn't what you think, I said, my eyes locked on the camera. I'm handling it, but we need to talk when you're back. I hung up, my heart racing. I'd planted the seed, and I could almost feel Vivian's panic through the camera. She was losing her grip, and I was ready to take it all the way. An hour later, I heard tires screeching in the driveway. Vivian stormed through the front door, using the keys she'd somehow kept after I'd asked for it back last year. Her face was flushed, her usual polished look unraveling. Her cardigan was misbuttoned, her hair slipping from its bun. Serena, what do you think you're doing? She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Calling investigators, spreading lies about me to Hudson? I stood in the living room, my arms crossed, forcing myself to stay calm. My heart was pounding, but I wouldn't let her see my fear. I'm just reporting suspicious activity, I said evenly. Why does that bother you, Vivian? Her eyes darted around the room, lingering on the bookshelf where the camera was hidden. You're being paranoid, she said, but her voice wavered. I'm just worried about you, that's all. Are you? I asked, stepping closer. I pulled out my phone, where Mavis had sent me screenshots of the live camera feeds. Then explain these. Cameras in my kitchen, my hallway, my home. Streaming to your phone for weeks. Vivian's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Save it, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. The police have the logs, the recordings, everything. The only question is what happens next. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. I was just trying to protect Hudson, she whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. You don't understand how much he means to me. This isn't protection, I said, my voice firm. This is control. And it stops now. You tell Hudson the truth, or I will. Right on cue, Hudson's car pulled into the driveway. My stomach twisted. He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow. He walked in, his face etched with confusion, his teacher's satchel still slung over his shoulder. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Mom, why are you crying? Before Vivian could spin another story, I held up my phone, showing him the live feed of our living room. Your mother put cameras in our house, I said quietly. She's been watching us for weeks. Hudson stared at the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something darker, betrayal. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Tell me this isn't true. Vivian's sobs broke free, but they weren't the manipulative tears I'd seen before. These were raw, desperate. I was trying to protect you, she said. She's not right for you, Hudson. I had to make sure. No. Hudson cut her off, his voice hard. She's exactly who I thought she was. You're the one who's not who I thought. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. How long have you known? Mavis found them yesterday, I said, my voice softening. We've been documenting everything. When they were installed, every time she accessed them. Hudson walked to the bookshelf, his hands shaking as he reached up and yanked the camera down. Where else? He asked, his voice low but steady. I pointed out each location, watching as he removed them one by one, his jaw tight. Vivian's protests grew weaker with each camera he pulled down, her control slipping away. Keys, Hudson said suddenly, turning to his mother. Give me your house keys.
Now.
Hudson, please, Vivian pleaded, clutching her purse. I did this for you. No, he said, his voice like steel. You did this for yourself. Because you can't stand not being in charge of my life.
Give me the keys.
As Vivian fumbled in her purse, I saw something break in Hudson's eyes. Years of defending her, excusing her, were crumbling. I felt a pang of sadness for him, but also a surge of relief. For the first time, he was choosing us, our marriage, our home, over her. After Vivian left, Hudson and I sat in the living room, the dismantled cameras scattered on the coffee table like broken pieces of her control. The silence was heavy, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when you're figuring out what's left standing. I'm so sorry, Hudson whispered, his hand reaching for mine. All those times you said something felt off, I should have listened. I squeezed his hand, my heart aching but hopeful. You're listening now, I said. That's what matters. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Hudson started therapy, working through the tangled knot of his relationship with his mother. I went with him sometimes, not because I had to, but because I wanted us to rebuild together. Vivian, faced with the threat of legal charges, agreed to therapy too. Mavis helped us install new security cameras, ones we controlled, monitoring only the outside of our house. We changed the locks, set clear boundaries, and started reclaiming our home. A few months later, a letter arrived from Vivian's therapist. She'd been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, and she was making progress. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Vivian herself, the words shaky but sincere. I'm sorry for what I did. I see now how wrong I was. Thank you for giving me a chance to change. Hudson read it first, his face unreadable. Do you want to respond? He asked, handing me the letter. I thought about it, my fingers tracing the paper. Yes, I said finally. But on our terms. We met Vivian at a coffee shop in town, a neutral space where we could talk without the weight of our house hanging over us. She looked different, smaller, somehow, her usual confidence replaced with something quieter. "I've been learning about boundaries," she said, her voice soft. "About trust and letting go. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to be better." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Real life doesn't work that way. But it was a start. Vivian learned that her need to control had nearly cost her everything. Hudson learned to stand up for our marriage, to draw lines he'd never drawn before. And I learned that sometimes the best way to fight isn't with anger, but with truth, holding up a mirror and letting someone see themselves clearly. Our home became ours again. The spaces that felt violated were filled with new memories. Hudson and I cooking dinner together, laughing over my terrible attempts at his mom's meatloaf recipe. Last week, Vivian sent another letter, this one with a certificate from her therapy program and a simple note. "Thank you for the wake-up call." Hudson pinned it to our fridge, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a symbol of how far we'd come. Sometimes, the people who hurt us most are the ones who need help the most. The cameras meant to expose my flaws ended up revealing a deeper truth, one that set us all free. Now, when I walk through our house, I don't check for hidden lenses or question if I'm being watched. I see a home that's stronger for surviving the storm, a marriage that stood tall against interference, and a family learning, slowly but surely, what love and trust really mean. To everyone who's walked this journey with me, thank you. You've stood by me through betrayal, battles, and hard-won victories. If this story hit home, if it made you feel the fire of standing up for your own space, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every story we share is a piece of someone's fight for truth, trust, and a fresh start. Keep guarding your own boundaries, and I'll see you in the next one, where we rebuild, one truth at a time.